All right. I think that the Konica should be the next hipster fad. I really think that hipsters should embrace the auto reflex. Because if you're under 30, you can actually say, honestly and with a straight face, hey man, I was into these things before anybody. Like, it was a totally forgotten system and nobody knew about it, except, me. And like the Hexanon lenses are just as good as Nicors and Takumar, so not that I expect you to know that. I think this really has hipster appeal. I think it could really be the next hipster trend. I nominate Konica. So today I want to talk about hipsterism. That is the idea, the mentality of hipsterism. Not necessarily individuals or people, but the abstract concept which can affect anyone regardless of one's sense of aesthetic. So I began thinking about this many, many years ago. Well, not so long ago. Some years ago, back when I had a normal day job. And I was leaving the office, and I looked at my assistant and said, hey, Kelly, are you going to the slam poetry reading later tonight? There was going on at one of the local galleries. And Kelly was probably one of the most literate office assistants in town at that point. She had recently graduated from a very prestigious Northeastern university with a bachelor's in fine arts and literature, and actually had a contract with a legitimate major publishing firm to publish her novel. And she was working for me part-time while she was finishing up that project. I was kind of joking with her, but her response really surprised me, because I saw this look of indignant, if not outright anger on her face as she looked up at me and scowled and said, slam poetry is for people who think you don't need to work for your art. I mean, she was serious. She was darn serious. And it got me thinking. That simple phrase, that sentence of hers sort of rattled around in my head for a long, long time, until the thought process crystallized, and I think I know what she meant and why it's so important. And to illustrate the point, I'm going to talk about a couple of movies. Two movies that I think illustrate two diametrically opposed views of the creative process. And the first movie I want to talk about is called Leonard Cohen, I'm Your Man. And I have the DVD, and here it is right there. In 2006, this film was released, and it is a series of concert performances by various artists covering Leonard Cohen songs. And interspersed with the performances are interviews with the various artists, including who's on here? Nick Cave, here we go. U2, Rufus Wainwright, Nick Cave, Jarvis Cocker, Anthony, Martha Wainwright, and Beth Orton. I think there may be others, but so these folks gave interviews in which they sort of reflected upon how Leonard Cohen had influenced their art. And also the movie also includes interviews with Leonard Cohen himself. And it becomes very clear during the interviews that Leonard Cohen worked for a living. He was a professional, and he regarded himself as a professional. And his profession was poet. He was a poet, and a very serious poet. And he really took the concept of poetry seriously, and he took his writing very seriously. What did he say? He quoted, I forgot who quoted, who said that poets were the unofficial legislators of the world or something. There's some quote in the film like that. And he laughed about it, said, when I was young, we really took that seriously. We really believed that we were doing something really important. And he worked hard. And he worked as hard as any other professional. Doctor, lawyer, engineer, accountant, anything. Leonard Cohen woke up in the morning early, brushed his teeth, shaved, put on a business suit, and went to work as a poet every day. That's what he did. And he talks about his process, and he talks about why, well, he talks about that it doesn't come easy, that you have to work for it. He talks about one of his songs. I forgot the name of the song, but the lyrics go, "You lose your grip and then you slip into the masterpiece." And he's talking about how you may set out in pursuit of a certain thing which you think is going to be your masterpiece, but in the course of doing so, you reach a point of exhaustion, which sometimes could result in a creative catharsis, at which point you realize that your true masterpiece was in another direction. And this is all part and parcel of a process of putting your heart and soul into your work and working at it. And sometimes he would start writing something and walk away and come back a long time later, and it would take a long time for that particular poem or song or whatever he was writing to crystallize and to the point where he was really happy that he could release it. It was it's almost like the artistic equivalent of what used to be called the Protestant work ethic. And it's impressive. It's impressive to listen to him talk about it, and it's impressive to listen to the other artists as they discuss their relationship with Leonard Cohen and their knowledge of him and of his process and how it contributed to their process as well. So that's one view of the creative process, right? Wake up early, get dressed, and go to work. There's a competing view, and that competing view became clear to me when I saw another movie. And this other movie is, I think it's fair to say it's an independent movie, although it does have a whole lot of A-list talent. But I don't even know what independent movie means. It premiered at Sundance. I guess doesn't that mean it's independent? I don't know. So there's this film called Frank, and it premiered at Sundance in 2014. And it stars Michael Fassbender in the lead role as Frank, Donald Gleason as John, and Maggie Gyllenhaal as Clara. And Frank is the story of a band, and Frank is the leader of the band. The individual Frank is the leader of the band, played by Michael Fassbender. Clara is a band member. She plays the theremin, maybe another instrument, I forgot. And Donald Gleason plays John, who is sort of your average, typical, suburban, upper-middle-class 20-something. Just sort of an everyman kind of character. And by happenstance, although John, he has some decent keyboard skills, he fancies himself a musician, and he has aspirations to be a songwriter. So through happenstance, John finds himself in the position where the band, the name of which is unpronounceable deliberately, the band finds itself in need of a keyboardist, ASAP. There's a show tonight. Our keyboardist is, not available permanently, and John happens to be, in the right place at the right time. So he becomes the band's keyboardist, and thus begins his journey and adventure with the band. So the tale of the story is told basically through John's relationship with Frank and Clara. And Clara is a member of the band who treats John with unmitigated, unrefined contempt from the get-go. She does not like him one darn bit and lets him know it. You see, Clara knows John is an imposter. He's not really a musician. He's not really cool. He's not really creative. But John doesn't know this, and he doesn't acknowledge it. And that's his sin. You see, throughout the film, and it's interesting, because the film, as I write here, it truly is a cinematic defense of hipsterism. It absolutely is. That's the main thesis of the movie. And John is the bad guy. He's the unhip guy who's trying to, trespass amongst the true creatives. But the film nonetheless portrays John as a decent, honest fellow. He doesn't lie, cheat, or steal. The only lie would be the claim that he's a musician when arguably he's not. But that's kind of the point of the story. So, he's acts with pure intentions. He's well-intentioned. He only wants the best for the band. He works as hard as he can. And nonetheless, he never really earns the respect of his bandmates, and certainly not Clara, who spots him as an imposter from day one and is determined to let everyone else know and force John to realize that you ain't one of us, buddy. You're not cool, and you never will be. You see, cool is something you have, something you're born with. It's not something you can work for. And those of us who are cool, well, we just exude cool. It's effortless. It's part of who we are. It's just what we do. We're hip. We're creative. And you are not. John's relationship with Frank is different, but also instructive. Because Frank and John, there's no animosity between Frank and John, in contrast to Clara. But Frank is the leader of the band, and he is like on the cool scale, this one goes to 11 kind of thing, right? I mean, Frank is just the coolest of the cool. He's the undisputed leader of the band. He's the creative genius behind the band. And his relationship with John is uncomfortable. It's awkward, but not contentious. But they don't communicate. They speak to one another. They sit down and try to talk. But Frank and John never really communicate with one another. They can't understand each other when the other is speaking. They don't understand what the other means. It's almost as if they exist on separate planes of reality and are incapable of understanding one another. That's how far apart they are. And that's kind of the point. Because Frank is the embodiment of art, of creativity, of hip, of cool. And he's just born with it. And it just flows from him naturally. Everything Frank does is just cool. John, on the other hand, genuinely wants to be a good musician. He wants to be cool like everybody else. And he works really hard at it. But that's his mistake. His mistake is the belief that you can work hard at it. And you can't. Cool is just, it's intrinsic. It's something that you're either born with or not. You can't develop it from within. When I say intrinsic, that's not actually accurate. Because the thesis of the film is that the art, the creativity is not intrinsic. It's something that it exists out there in the ether. And, the cool kids, they're the channels through which the rest of us get to enjoy art and creativity. They channel it for us. They don't work for it. They don't develop it. It just flows naturally from them. And towards the end of the film, what's ironic is that, or what I found ironic at least, is that at the end of the movie, John's redemption is his realization of his own inferior status and his acceptance of it. At the end of the movie, John accepts it. He understands. The penny drops. He gets it. I'm not cool. I'm not a musician. I'm not creative. And he walks away in silent shame. It's a fascinating film. I encourage you to see it because it really does illustrate, in my view, the absolute contempt that the hipster ideal has for anyone who thinks that art requires work and effort. This is exactly what Kelly told me. That's what she meant. That's what she meant. She was talking about Clara and Frank. You don't need to work for your art. You just channel it. And this is a problem in analog photography. It's a big curse in analog photography because we have, our hobby is cursed with magic talismans. And these magic talismans are being sold to us. And we're being told that you have to have a magic talisman. Or if you can't find your creativity, just get the right magic talisman and you can find it. You see, you need one of these things. If you're not satisfied with your work, if the creativity doesn't flow, just here we go, try this. It's magic. If you do this, then the result will be art. It's suggested It's implied, except on the last item on the list, in which it's explicit. The art lens. Where's the art? It ain't in you, buddy. It's in the lens. And you got to shell out $1,000 if you want one. And it's worth it. Because where else are you going to find art? Not inside you. That's pointless. You need the talisman. You need the magic charm with which you can conjure the creativity and the art out of the ether and onto your image. Practice, hard work, loser. That's the mentality. That's the attitude. That's what bugs me about this stuff. That's what bugs me about the what I call the hipster attitude, hipsterism. It is a cancer and a plague, in my humble opinion. And this is why. I don't claim to be a great artist. I don't even claim to. I can't even call myself an artist with a straight face, to be perfectly honest. And I don't want to get into the debate over, is photography art? Let's just assume that it is. I claim to be a photographer of average competence. That's it. And as soon as I get a website up, I'll link to it, and you can see for yourself. My images are reasonably well exposed, well focused, and follow basic rules of composition. But beyond that, I make no grand claims. And maybe I'll work at it all in my entire life and never really produce any great creative art. But it's the process. It's about the process. I enjoy the process. I enjoy working at it. I enjoy the hard work. I like the hard work. The hard work is the challenge. That's what makes it worthwhile. Without hard work, there's no payoff. There is no magic talisman. All right. That's what I got for you today. I hope you found this useful. I hope you found this thought-provoking. I have a sneaking suspicion this may become the most heavily downvoted video I've produced, but let's see. Let's find out. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure what people think about this topic because nobody's talking about it. I don't think anybody. If there are other essays or opinion pieces out there about this, drop a comment and link to them. I'd really like to know what other people think. These are my thoughts. This is what I'm sharing with you. But if there are other essays or blogs or vlogs or what have you discussing this, I'd be curious. I'd really be curious about the opinions of the hipsteristic contamination of the creative process and why it's a problem, or maybe why it's not. Tell me why I'm wrong. If I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. I ain't the Pope. I make mistakes. But I really don't think I'm wrong about this. I really don't. Okay, those are my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, oh shoot, excuse me. That's my warning to wrap things up. So if you enjoyed the video, please do subscribe and check out the links below. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.